Right, we're going to kick off with Thursday's Daily Mail. Lewis, what have you got?
We've got the biggest tax cut since the 1980s, and this is the budget that the Chancellor... I don't understand how politics in this country works.
Well, I'm glad we came to you first.
You're on the right show.
Well, you can explain it to me. You have the head of the government, who's Rishi Sunak, and then you got this other guy who's in charge of the money.
The Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Yes, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt. We haven't heard a lot about him because the other people have been messing things up.
They have. Well, since Nick's here, and Nick is rather an expert on the budget, why don't you tell us what it's all about?
I can do, yeah. I mean, the main things are the national insurance cut from 12% to 10%. So you'll save £450 a year if you're earning 35k. It doesn't really affect Lewis, but some people it will. And you've got.
Would you keep my business?
I'm sorry. You showed me a form before that bank statement before we went on air. And it's just
he didn't mention the figures, Lewis. So I think it's
fine.
He was very discreet.
But some people have pointed out for every £1 you gain in national insurance, it's offset by £4 we'll lose on income tax thresholds, which have been frozen to 2028, which is called fiscal drag. 4 million more people will be dragged into paying income tax, and 3 million more people will be dragged into the higher rate of tax.
Yes.
So,
but of course, this isn't about what's good.
I sound like Liam Halligan. I was all just memorised.
I mean, it was very impressive, Nick.
I've got more.
But really, this isn't altruistic. This isn't about helping individual people and families in their struggling circumstances. It is largely about developing growth. And the idea here is, according to the Chancellor, his view is that a cut in national insurance of this kind will have a bigger impact on growth than an income tax cut. Is he right?
Well, now you've just gone beyond my economic pay grade. When I said those stats, I sounded quite good. I mean, I've got no idea on that.
Well, I mean, isn't that what quasi-quaton? Isn't that what that guy was involved in?
Yeah.
Didn't they do this a year ago? Or whatever?
Not to the extent. I mean, what quasi-quaton?
But weren't they heading in that direction? And they were pounded, and they were forced out of office. And
well, they were pounded, Lewis, because the markets were spooked, which is the phrase they like to use.
Yeah, whereas Hunt's been sort of warning. But then Hunt said they weren't going to do these tax cuts. They're only doing them now because they're desperate about the election, which we'll get into later. But by the way, Liam actually said earlier today on GB, it's a 5 or 6p increase to the basic rate of income tax in real terms. Yes. So that's the big criticism. Maybe we'll get on to that. And there's more stuff. There's minimum wage. There's a triple lock. There's so many things to talk about.
Well, let's just quickly talk about the minimum wage rise. Okay, so this is an example of... And there's a rise in benefits. So this is an example of how they are ostensibly helping the weakest in society, the most vulnerable in society. Doesn't strike me as a particularly traditionally Tory approach.
And it's a big rise. Minimum wage has gone up from 10.42 to 11.44.
Yes.
And my problem with minimum wage is always, even in my layman understanding, is that it penalises businesses and they can't afford to hire people, and that'd be my worry.
OK, but on the other hand, earning, what is it, £10.40 something an hour, it's difficult to live on that, and I think it is important that... But, it is.
I remember getting paid £3 something at Virgin Megastore in Newcastle.
I got even less than that as a paperboy, right? So I know what it's like.
But it isn't the business of the government to find what is a living wage. We don't know what a living wage is. Each person is a different...
It was arbitrarily come up with as well, this number.
Yeah. What do you think of Nick's view that, although obviously I've made the case that people on minimum wage do need to be able to sustain their existence, Nick's saying that this is actually bad for employers because they can't, their costs go up.
I agree with that, and I would have to say that I'm against the minimum wage. But on the other side, if you don't let the minimum wage go up, right? If you don't you don't force it on the people, then what happens is the government then feels the necessity to give the benefits to those people, whatever that's called, where they actually take somebody who's not making much money and helps out Amazon by sending money to that person.
Zero hours contracts? Are you talking about?
Not 0 hours contract.
I've zoned out. Sorry. Outsourcing. Say it again.
No, don't say it again. I think we've got the gist.
No. It's a very important concept, which is there are people who are being paid a low amount of money, which is below a certain amount of money, and then the government says, okay, instead of saying you should stop working entirely, we will top you up.
We'll top you up, exactly.
Right. Yeah. And who does that benefit except the
people being topped up, presumably?
The largest companies, because they don't have to pay that.
Oh, there's that, yeah, absolutely. Well, listen, we're going to move on to another story about the budget. Obviously, all of the front covers are covering the budget, but in different ways. The Mail seems sort of positive, slightly dubious, perhaps. The Mirror is full cynical, I think. What are the Mirror doing, Nick?
Yeah, the Mirror go, do they take us all for fools? And as you say, it's more anti the budget, but it's not that dissimilar to the things people are saying on GB News throughout the day. So it's, no one can say we're partisan to the Tories there, but it's, they're saying the NI cut, but tax surges takes more, which is exactly what I said.
Yeah.
Growth slows and inflation stays high, more austerity to fund election bribes, which obviously...
But inflation staying high, I mean, that is it's the tricky thing to either regulate or to predict, ultimately. According to this, it's saying that the Office for Budget Responsibility is saying that inflation is going to fall to 2.8% by the end of next year, with a target of 2% by 2025. And it was 11% October last year, so it's going in the right direction. But it's very, very difficult to kind of... I mean, what can they do? These are predictions. These are not guarantees.
Yeah, I don't...
But at the end of the... When the chickens all get plucked, they're spending almost 38% of GDP on taxes.
Yes.
And that's very labor of them. And what is this, World War II, that so much money is being spent on taxes? And I think what they're doing is they're giving a little bit, this is a typical thing, they're giving a little bit of it back.
Right.
I think we still do have the highest tax burden since World War II, so I think so. So I think you're right. By the way, Lewis accidentally said one other smart thing before when he said the division between the PM and the Chancellor.
Yes.
I keep going on about this Dominic Cummings interview, but he did say something really interesting. He said when he came in, Cummings, into the number 10, there was no communication on economic forecast and data between number 10 and number 11, and they had to install that. And the second that Dominic Cummings left, they got rid of it again. So they keep secrets from each other, which does seem absolutely immense.
That is a bad idea, particularly since they live next door to each other.
Yeah.
Neighbours should get on.
Yeah.
Just before we finish on this, what do you guys think of this work experience placement idea, that if people are out of work for 18 months, they have to then be placed in work experience? Do you think that's a fair kind of... Otherwise, they don't get the benefits.
Well, I think I don't know what's in place, but I know in every country, in every system, they don't let people take benefits
You're sort
forever.
of against welfare, aren't you?
I am, which is ironic considering I am one of the biggest.